I medically tattooed my child under the recommendation of a doctor. My daughter Kayla has this rare condition called Klippel-Feil syndrome. Basically, her neck vertebrae are fused together, which means her neck doesn't move like it should, and her head sits weird on her shoulders. The doctors explained that if she ever got hurt and someone tried to move her neck the wrong way, she could become paralyzed or worse. When Kayla was 7, we met with this specialist who laid out all the scary scenarios: car accidents, playground falls, sports injuries. Any first responder or doctor who didn't know about her condition might try to stabilize her neck in a way that could permanently damage her spinal cord. The specialist said we needed to make sure medical personnel would know immediately not to manipulate her neck. He recommended getting a medical alert tattoo right on her upper chest that would be visible even if she was unconscious. At first, I thought he was crazy. Tattoo my 7-year-old, but then he showed me photos of other kids who'd gotten them for similar conditions. They were small, simple, just the basic medical info in clear black letters. The doctor explained that medical jewelry could get lost or removed during trauma, but a tattoo would always be there. He connected us with a tattoo artist who specialized in medical tattoos and worked with kids. The guy had done hundreds of these procedures and knew exactly how to make it as painless as possible. I talked to Kayla about it, explaining why it was important. She was scared at first, but when I told her it was like getting a special mark that would keep her safe, she got more interested. The tattoo artist let her pick the font and showed her exactly what it would look like. The actual process took maybe 15 minutes. It was just 3 lines. Klippel-Feil syndrome, do not manipulate neck, and see medical ID. Kayla gripped my hand but didn't cry. The artist gave her stickers afterward and told her she was braver than most adults he worked on. For years, everything was fine. Kayla's teachers knew about the tattoo. Her pediatrician approved of it, and we never had any issues. She actually liked having it because it made her feel special and protected. Then last month, Kayla's school called me to come in for a meeting. I figured it was about her grades or maybe a field trip permission slip. Instead, I walked into a room with the principal, the school counselor, and someone from Child Protective Services. They started asking me about Kayla's tattoo. Apparently, her new gym teacher had seen it during a swimming unit and reported it as suspected child abuse. The CPS worker kept asking why I would mark my child permanently and whether I understood the psychological damage I might have caused. I tried explaining about Klippel-Feil syndrome and showed them her medical records, but they weren't hearing it. The CPS worker said medical tattoos on children were extremely unusual and that there were other options I should have explored first. She kept talking about how tattoos on minors were illegal in most states and questioning whether I had proper medical approval. The school counselor suggested that maybe the tattoo was making Kayla feel different from other kids, and that I should consider having it removed. I lost it at that point and asked if they would prefer my daughter risk paralysis just so she could look like everyone else. The meeting ended with them opening an official investigation. CPS visited our house twice, interviewed Kayla privately, and made me provide documentation from every doctor who had ever treated her condition. They even contacted the tattoo artist to verify that the procedure had been medically recommended. Kayla was confused and upset by all the questions. She kept asking if she was in trouble and whether they were going to take her away because of her tattoo. I had to explain that some people didn't understand why she needed it, but that we had done the right thing to keep her safe. The whole investigation took 6 weeks. Finally, CPS closed the case when Kayla's specialist wrote a detailed letter explaining that the tattoo was medically necessary and that removing it could put her at serious risk. The school apologized, but the damage was done. Now Kayla covers up her tattoo at school with Band-Aids because she's embarrassed about all the attention it caused. The tattoo that was supposed to protect her ended up making her feel like a freak. And I'm still getting dirty looks from other parents who think I'm some kind of monster for putting permanent ink on the day CPS officially closed the case. I remember just sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the letter that cleared me of any wrongdoing. I should have felt relief, and part of me did, but mostly I just felt drained. 6 weeks of being treated like I'd hurt my own daughter when all I ever tried to do was protect her. Kayla came into the room, saw me holding the letter, and asked quietly, "So, they believe us now?" I nodded. She smiled a little and went back to coloring, but I could tell she still felt uneasy. That night, I sat on the edge of her bed while she brushed her doll's hair. I told her how brave she had been through everything, the questions, the doctor visits, the home checks. She looked up and said, "I don't want people to see it anymore, Mom. They think it's weird." That broke me a little. The tattoo that was meant to save her life had somehow become a mark of shame in her young eyes. For days after, I kept replaying everything in my mind. The doctor's recommendation, the specialist's words, the reasoning that made perfect sense at the time. I still knew we'd made the right decision, but I hated that she was paying the emotional price for it. Then one morning, while dropping her off at school, something unexpected happened. As Kayla got out of the car, another mom, someone I hadn't met before, walked up to me. She said quietly, "My son has a heart condition. He wears a medical bracelet, but he keeps losing it. I heard about what you did for your daughter, and I think you were really smart." It was the first time anyone had said that to me. It reminded me that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look right to everyone, especially when people don't understand the fear that comes with raising a medically fragile child. A few weeks later, Kayla had her annual checkup with her specialist. He asked how she'd been holding up. When I told him about the school ordeal, he shook his head and sighed. "You did exactly what I would have done," he said. "You can't rely on bracelets or notes in emergencies. That tattoo might one day save her life." He turned to Kayla and said gently, "You know, Kayla, not everyone has something that makes them special. But yours is a mark that tells the world to keep you safe. That's kind of a superpower, isn't it?" I'll never forget the way she looked at him, like she was seeing her tattoo in a completely new light. On the way home, she asked if we could get a new swimsuit for summer. One that shows my tattoo again. I asked if she was sure, and she nodded. "Yeah," she said. "I don't want to hide it anymore." The first time she went swimming again, I saw a few kids whisper and point. But instead of covering it, Kayla stood a little taller. When one girl asked what it was, she simply said, "It's my safety mark. It tells doctors how to help me." The girl just nodded, and that was that. That night, Kayla hugged me and said, "I think Grandpa was right." I frowned, confused. "Right about what?" She smiled and said, "That scars and marks just mean you've survived something." And in that moment, I realized she wasn't embarrassed anymore. She was proud. The world might still look at her tattoo and see something strange or wrong, but to me, it's a symbol of love, of fear, of doing what a parent has to do, even when the world doesn't understand. I didn't tattoo my child because I wanted to mark her. I did it because I wanted to protect her. And now, after everything, I think she finally understands that too. Story 2: I raised my daughter alone after the divorce. At her wedding, her father-in-law insulted me in front of everyone until I stood up and said, "Do you even know who I am?" His face went pale. Chapter 1: Just her and me. The day my ex-wife walked out, she said, "I need freedom. You can keep the house and the kid." She didn't even look back. I stood at the front door holding our 5-year-old daughter, Alina, as she clung to my neck, asking why Mommy wasn't kissing her goodbye. From that day on, it was just us. I learned to braid hair using YouTube tutorials. I sat through piano recital and school plays with tears in my eyes and a camcorder in my shaky hands. I packed lunches with cartoon napkins, told bedtime stories I made up on the spot, and worked night shifts fixing HVAC just to keep our lives running. I never remarried. Not because I didn't have chances, but because no one could come between me and my daughter. And now, after 2 decades of love, sacrifice, and silent battles, I was sitting in the front row of her wedding, watching her walk down the aisle in a dress that took my breath away. Her eyes sparkled as she smiled at me. But behind me, I could already hear the low, dismissive murmur of someone I had never properly met. Her new father-in-law. Single father, huh? Probably some broke blue-collar handyman. Can't imagine what values he passed down. I ignored it. One day of peace, I told myself, for her. But that was only the beginning. Chapter 2: The Whispering Snakes in Suits. The reception was held in an opulent hall, white marble floors, chandeliers that looked like they belonged in palaces, and centerpieces taller than most of the guests. Everything about it screamed money, not mine, of course. The groom's family had spared no expense. I sat at a round table near the dance floor, watching my daughter laugh and dance with her husband. Her joy was everything to me, but I couldn't ignore the whispers anymore. 2 tables behind me, the groom's father, Mr. Harold Kingsley, was holding court like a king among lesser nobles. Polished silver hair, gold cufflinks, the kind of fake laugh you hear in boardrooms. Raised her alone, huh? He scoffed to a group of men in matching tailored suits. Poor thing probably grew up eating instant noodles and wearing thrift store clothes. Now she thinks she's royalty because she married into real-class laughter. Another voice chimed in. The man can barely afford a suit that fits. Looks like he walked in off a construction site. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palm. But I didn't react, not yet. A woman nearby added mockingly, "Well, she must have done something right if your son proposed to her. Maybe she's got survival instincts. Street smarts. You know, the kind you get when you grow up with nothing." More laughter. It was no longer just whispers. It was open mockery, disrespect. And it was loud enough for others to hear. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Some looked away. No one stood up until they crossed the line. Mr. Kingsley chuckled and said, "Let's just pray she doesn't bring that kind of bloodline into our family. We're trying to build legacy here, not fix strays." That's when I stood up. I didn't say a word yet. I simply walked across the dance floor in full view of everyone, guests, servers, family, my daughter toward their table. And when I reached them, I looked Harold Kingsley dead in the eye and calmly asked, "Do you even know who I am?" He froze, his smirk collapsed like wet paper. Chapter 3, The Truth They Never Expected. "Do you even know who I am?" I repeated louder this time. The music dimmed. Conversations halted. Even the servers paused. Harold Kingsley straightened up, his bravado faltering. "You're the bride's father," he said dismissively, waving a hand like he was shooing a fly. "The plumber, right?" "I mean stepfather." I gave a small smile. "No, I'm the man who paid for your son's law school education 4 years ago when your third company was hemorrhaging cash. I'm the man who owns the property your restaurant franchise sits on. The man who bailed you out when the bank started circling your offices like vultures during co-dead silence." I leaned in slightly and added, "And yes, I did raise my daughter alone. I packed her lunch every morning, braided her hair with trembling hands the first day of school, and stood in rainstorms just to afford her piano lessons. Because she loved music more than anything, I turned to the table of suits behind him. You mocked her for where she came from, but where she came from is me, and what I built is stronger than all your inherited wealth combined." Harold's face was pale now. I could see his son, the groom, had stood up behind him, stunned. His new wife, my daughter, had stopped dancing. Her mascara was streaking down her cheeks. Then I reached into my blazer and pulled out a thick white envelope. I was going to give this to the newlyweds in private. But since you all like public scenes so much, I placed the envelope on the table in front of Harold. He opened it hesitantly. Inside was a deed to a 2,500 square FT home in their dream neighborhood. Paid in full in my daughter's name. Gasps. Harold looked up at me speechless. I turned to my daughter and her husband. "Your wedding gift," I said. "From the man they called low-educated fake dad." My daughter burst into tears. She ran to me and hugged me like she did when she was 7 and scared of thunder. The guests who had laughed earlier now sat frozen in shame. And Harold Kingsley, he couldn't even look me in the eyes anymore. Chapter 4, The Public Reckoning. The silence in the hall was crushing. For a long moment, no one dared move. The once smug faces of Harold Kingsley and his entourage were now ghostly pale. Even the bride's elite bridesmaids who had giggled behind their glasses earlier stared down at their heels. My daughter was sobbing into my chest. Her husband, still stunned, stepped forward slowly. "Dad," he said, barely audible, "is that true?" "He helped us. He owns the land." Harold didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I turned to the groom. Every favor, every dollar was to help her dream come true. I never asked for credit, never needed it. But you allowed them, I gestured around the room, to treat her like she was disposable, like I was disposable. The groom's jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. Then, to everyone's surprise, he walked over to his father and snatched the envelope from his trembling hand. "My wife deserves better than this," he said. "He is more of a father than you'll ever be." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then out of nowhere, clapping. One of the guests, an old friend of mine from back when I worked odd jobs to make ends meet, stood and applauded. Then another and another. Soon the entire left side of the hall erupted in applause. Not for the money, not for the drama, but for truth, for love. For a father who never abandoned his daughter. No matter how cruel the world got. The Kingsleys sat in silence, their pride shattered. The bride, my daughter, took the mic from the DJ table, her voice shaking. "I want to say this loud and clear," she said, wiping her tears. "I made a mistake today. Not by marrying the man I love, but by letting people humiliate the man who raised me, who became my family when everyone else left." She turned toward me, eyes fierce. "You are my real dad. No degree, no amount of money, no table full of cowards could ever take that away from me. And then she did something that silenced the room all over again. She walked over to the nameplate that had mocked me. Loud, educated fake dad picked it up and snapped it in half. Then she dropped it in Harold's lap. Chapter 5. The next morning, the wedding didn't end the way anyone expected. The band packed up early. The caterers quietly began clearing plates. Half the guests left without saying goodbye, ashamed of their silence during the humiliation. Others came to shake my hand, some with tears, others with apologies, all saying the same thing. We were wrong. Harold Kingsley tried to save face, attempting to give a toast near the end. But the groom interrupted him with a single line. We don't need speeches from strangers. That night, I didn't return home alone. I stayed with my daughter and her husband. They asked me to. We didn't talk about the event much. We sat quietly in the living room, drinking tea with the kind of silence that only family shares after a storm. The next morning, a black luxury car pulled into the driveway. A suited man stepped out and handed me an envelope, a formal offer. Harold Kingsley was trying to buy the land back at double the price. I didn't even open it. I handed it back. You had your chance, I said. Now, let's see how your hotel does with no entrance, no parking lot, and no legal access to the main road. The man swallowed hard. He'll go to court. I smiled. Then I'll go to the press. I have recordings from the wedding. A public humiliation, threats, bigotry. Let's see how that affects his reputation. He left without another word. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 days later, Harold's investors pulled out. The wedding scandal had made it to local news and social media. Hashtags were trending. Fake dad real hero, Jar wedding justice, Jar the nameplate shame. People from all over started commenting, sharing stories of their own low-educated parents who sacrificed everything for them. I didn't expect to go viral. I didn't want to. But the truth has a funny way of roaring when you try to silence it. Then came the call from the mayor's office. They wanted me to come in to discuss repurposing that land into a public community center with my name on the deed. But that's not what made me emotional. It was my daughter. She handed me a small wrapped box one evening and said, "Open it." Inside was a handcrafted wooden nameplate. It read, "Dad, the man who built us without ever needing a degree." I didn't cry in front of the crowd that day. But I cried now because in the end, respect isn't given by titles. It's earned by love. Chapter 6. The Man Behind the Curtain. The whispers turned into stunned silence as I took a deep breath and stood tall, my voice calm but resonant. "I'm sorry if I've disrupted your evening," I said. "But maybe I should clarify something since some people seem to have forgotten who I am." I pulled a small envelope from my inside pocket and handed it to a waiter with a nod. He walked over and gave it to the DJ who stopped the music and connected the contents to the screen behind the stage. Suddenly, the projector flickered to life. First, a slideshow began to play. Photos of me and my daughter over the years. Her first steps, her school graduation, me teaching her to ride a bike, the time I stayed up nights helping her study, her science fair, our travels together, all without her mother in the picture. Then a voiceover came, not mine, but hers, my daughter. She had recorded it just days before the wedding secretly. "To the world, I'm a bride today, but to my father, I will always be the girl he never gave up on." He was my mother, my father, my best friend, and my protector. Everything I am today, I owe to the man standing quietly in the back of the room right now. My father is not rich, not flashy, not loud, but he's the strongest man I know. And if anyone ever disrespects him, they're disrespecting me too. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the waitstaff had paused. Her fiancé, my now son-in-law, looked visibly moved, and the groom's mother sat rigid, her lips quivering. As for the arrogant father-in-law, he looked like the wind had been knocked out of him. Red-faced, mouth slightly open, hands twitching, unsure if he should run or apologize. I walked up to him and said, "You asked earlier who I am. I'm the man who raised the daughter your son was lucky enough to marry. I'm not here for validation. I'm here for her. But now you know, I didn't raise her to tolerate disrespect, not even from family." He tried to stammer something, but my daughter had already walked over. "Dad," she said, hugging me tightly in front of everyone. "Thank you. And I'm sorry I let them talk like that. Never again." The crowd applauded. From that moment on, everything shifted. I was no longer the lowly single father. I was the man who shaped a woman strong enough to demand respect and love no matter the audience. And the father-in-law, he never crossed me again. The hall was silent. The father-in-law's face twitched as I stood, my voice calm but cutting. "Do you even know who I am?" He blinked, confusion rising. You're just her dad, a plumber or something. A dry laugh escaped my lips. A plumber? Is that what you think? I turned to the crowd, then slowly pulled my phone from my pocket. I tapped a few times, then cast the screen to the large projector the hotel had set up for the evening slideshow. The screen lit up, not with pictures of the bride and groom, but with logos, my companies. One by one, my businesses, charities, foundation awards, news features, and honorary degrees filled the screen. There was an audible gasp from the crowd. The wedding planner dropped her pen. The father of the groom slowly turned red, then white, then red again. I may fix pipes, I said. But I also own the largest sanitation services company in this region. I employ over 4,000 people. I donated the scholarships for your son's college. In fact, this entire wedding venue is one of my holdings. You're standing in a place I paid to restore from ruins. His wife's eyes widened. Wait, the renovation story on the news? That was me. Then I turned to my daughter and son-in-law. You two didn't know because I didn't want my money to define our relationship. I raised my daughter to love people, not power. I wanted her to marry a man who respected others, not just their title. The groom's eyes filled with tears. I do, I swear I do. The bride grabbed my hand. Dad, why didn't you ever tell us? Because it never mattered. Until now, I glanced one last time at the father-in-law. He was trembling. The room felt like it held its breath. Then I gave a half smile. Carry on with the wedding. And I walked out the door. The silence behind me was deafening. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Revenge Exposed because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks. And every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.